what I want to do now is take the pleasure of introducing our first keynote for the day. Peter Sheldon joins us from across the pond, battling time zones, the middle of the night, and anything else to blow our minds with his e-commerce knowledge. Peter is my favorite speaker to watch. I think I've said it maybe 3 or 4 times, and it's never been false. Absolutely, never. He always brings new content. He packs so much into his talks, and I always watch his talks back at least twice. They're just that great. So I'll shut up. I'll leave you to the day. I'll be back after Peter's talk one last time, and then you'll see me again at the end and hand over to Peter. Peter, get started.
Great. Thanks, Jamie. It's an honor and a pleasure to be back again. And yes, it's 1 a.m. for me, but hey, this is fun. I think the last time I did a webinar at 1 a.m. was a year ago for Meet Magento. So anyway, let's get started because as Jamie said, I always try and pack an awful lot into 30 minutes. And today we're going to be talking about Gen Z and a new generation of online shoppers, that is merchants, developers, people within the Magento and Adobe ecosystems. We really need to be aware of the upcoming changes that are going to happen, in this decade. Now, let's move forward first of all and take a little bit of a recap of 2020. When I was here a year ago, we were talking about how COVID-19 was really accelerating, online e-commerce growth. And as it turns out, through the remainder of 2020, this was not a temporary shift. It became very clear that the shift to digital and online buying is very much a permanent shift. And I think everyone is sort of aligned that the pendulum is not swinging back to where it was in 2019. So if you've been kidnapped by aliens for the last 18 months, a quick recap of what happened. We saw that, from a growth perspective that e-commerce was growing at a sort of rate of 16% year over year in 2019, and it accelerated to 41% in 2020. We saw adoption of buy online, pick up in store surge to 57%, and we saw, I think, a really interesting stat that Adobe tracks as part of our Adobe Analytics is how many what we call $2 billion online spending days they were. Back in 2019, there were 29 of these days. In 2020, there were over 50 of these days. So just the sheer capacity of the number of orders and the volume of online transactions that are happening has just gone through the roof. Now, if we look specifically, it's some data that Adobe has for the UK market. And what's really interesting is that, the UK continues to be sort of the canary in the coal mine. It really is, as always, it has always been sort of out on the bleeding edge. And so, the growth of online retail sales in the UK has outpaced the US, 66% versus 39%. The UK, again, further ahead of other markets when it comes to 50% of all of the online transactions came from smartphones in the UK. And so, and one of the other things that's really interesting, if you look at the chart below, is consumers are just shopping faster. A sort of new metric that we track is revenue per minute, and it's really trending up. While it's normal to see spikes during the holidays, there's been an increase in revenue per minute since the first lockdown went into effect in late March last year. Another thing that's really interesting is that the UK market has attracted the most new consumers online in 2020. So 15% of the consumers that reported shopping so far in 2021 had never purchased anything online at all prior to March 2020. And across the world, the demographics of new shoppers skews younger, with the greater share of young shoppers being new to e-commerce. So who are all these new online shoppers? Well, it turns out that much of the growth is being driven by a new generational cohort. And so really, it's time to sort of, move over millennials and welcome Gen X. There's a new online shopper in town. And what we're going to do through the rest of my presentation is really deep dive on Gen X. And so the first question that really comes up is who are the Gen X, the Gen Z generation. And so, the Gen Z are between 6 and 23 years of age today. They actually represent, 40% of all active consumers in the market. They're digitally native. The average Gen Zer received their first mobile phone at the age of 10 years old. Many of them grew up playing with their parents' mobile phones or tablets. The smartphone is their preferred method of communication, and on average, they spend 3 hours a day on their mobile device. They're highly diverse. They represent the leading edge of, at least in the US market, of changing racial and ethnic makeup. 52% of Gen Z in the US are non-Hispanic white, 25% are Hispanic, 14% are Black, and 6% are Asian, and 5% are other races or represent 2 or more races. And Gen Z spends close to 6 hours a day on social platforms. Instagram is a top destination, although TikTok adoption has seen a significant increase since the beginning of the pandemic, with over 70% of users on Gen Z now being users on TikTok now being represented by the Gen Z population. So if we fast forward a little bit and sort of look maybe towards the end of this decade, by 2027, we will then have 6 active generations of online shoppers. And Gen Z have recently overtaken Millennials to be the largest generational cohort, and representing 82 million, or 22% of the US population. And so globally, if we look today, the Gen Z population represents about 2.5 billion people. And over the remainder of the decade, they will rapidly become the largest spenders online. They will be the primary driver of growth for all online retail. Now, if we have a look at a few other sort of interesting stats and sort of deep dive a little bit, into Gen Z, when we look at some of the forecasts and estimates of the purchasing power of Gen Z, already, again, and apologies always for UK audience citing US numbers, but the purchasing power or share of wallet that Gen Z have is as high as $323 billion. And actually, when we look at the influence that Gen Z have on others in their household, primarily their parents, siblings, we can actually forecast that this number could be 4 times that size, sheerly based on the influence that they yield around the products and services that the household or family as a whole purchase. 71% of Gen Z either have a Netflix subscription or have a profile of an account in their household. 98% either own or have access to a smartphone. And by the end of the decade, Gen Z will represent 30% of the global workforce. And as I mentioned a moment ago, represents about 2.5 billion people today. Now, another really interesting thing about Gen Z, and not dissimilar to millennials, but Gen Z are highly active on social media, and their platform of choice, and this is really accelerated significantly through the pandemic, is TikTok, with 71% of the TikTok's platform users under the age of 24. But it's not just TikTok where Gen Z spend their time. Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Snapchat are all very, very popular with the Gen Z population. And when we think about the social networks, until a few years ago, the primary revenue stream for all social networks were ads. But in a recent Forrester Research survey, 44% of 12 to 17-year-olds said that they don't trust ads that they see online, although 56% agree that ads are a good way to learn about new products. So Gen Z are looking for more engaging experiences on these social platforms than just ads. And the social networks are adapting. They're moving away from being just offering up ads to actually offering up what we refer to at Adobe as shoppable experiences. So they're actually, becoming e-commerce platforms in their own right. They are, if you like, morphing from being social platforms into digital marketplaces where they become destinations for brands and retailers to sell the products in the platforms, the walled gardens where the end consumers, the Gen Z, are congregated. So, Hopefully I've just done, said a little bit of the scene on Gen Z, who they are. But really what I want to focus the remainder of this presentation on, after our quick crash course in Gen Z, is let's switch gears and think about some of the implications that online retailers really must consider over the remainder of the decade to ensure that they stay relevant as Gen Z's spending power increases. So first but not least is we really need to understand how Gen Z intend to pay for purchases, especially we've been through since really the birth of e-commerce 20 plus years ago. It's all been about credit cards, but if we move forward, credit cards are going to become less and less relevant. And if we look at the demographic makeup of Gen Zers, the oldest Gen Zers are 23, 24 years old today, and very few of them have access to credit cards, although they're almost certainly in the workplace. They're still building credit scores, they're still building relationships with banks, and to many of them, credit card is not something that they own or is obtainable. So merchants must look beyond sort of the basic credit card payment types if they want to A, attract, and B, just be able to sell to Gen Z shoppers online. Now, one of the things that's really, really interesting is that fintechs are really, rising to the challenge. And I think if we look at, Apple's model of allowing family sharing, the fact that, you can allow, children in your household to, purchase apps in the App Store and then be able to approve those apps, that's now being applied to banking. And I think, again, the UK is actually sort of, leading the charge here. Fintechs like GoHenry, Monzo, and Starling Bank have created these new digital bank accounts for kids where parents can transfer money to their child's account, set spending limits, and receive notifications of their purchases. So what's really different today is that kids aged between 6 to 16 now for the first time ever have access to their own prepaid debit card that can be used for online purchases. And it gives kids the freedom to shop online without having to ask permission to use their parents' credit card. Parents can set daily, monthly spend limits, restrict where and for what the card can be used for. And similar offerings are also available in the US. Companies like Greenlight, Step, and Copper are really trying to capture the youth market. Even JP Morgan Chase & Co. recently entered the space, introducing a similar child's account. So this is really interesting. For the first time ever, it's really providing independence to a younger generation to shop independently and not be dependent on their parents, through digital commerce. Now, another thing that's really taken off, through the pandemic and where there's a big adoption is buy now, pay later. In the US, more than 45 million people aged 14 and older will use buy now, pay later services this year. And a major draw of buy now, pay later services, particularly for younger cohorts, is financial flexibility. These type of solutions provide younger customers whose cash flow tends to be more limited with a greater flexibility around payments, especially for larger ticket items. Top items that Gen Zs are generally buying include electronics, clothing, fashion, furniture, appliances, other digital leisure goods like movies, music, and games. And many of these are larger ticket items, and some, and the ability to spread payments and to pay for those items, in installments, is very, very appealing to the Gen Z consumer. Gen Z are also embracing, both crypto and peer-to-peer payments. So if we look in the US, one very, very popular peer-to-peer payment platform is Venmo, which is owned by PayPal. Venmo, had over 50 million active accounts in 2019 and significantly more today. They processed nearly $160 billion in payment volume in 2020. But yet, 30% of small business owners haven't even heard of Venmo, and so 7 million of the Venmo user base, belong in an 18 to 34-year-old age group, and so Venmo have really become sort of again a disruptive force, and we're seeing more and more online retailers accepting Venmo And we're starting to see a few sort of bleeding edge online retailers accepting cryptocurrency. Tesla very famously accepted deposits on their cars using Bitcoin, although Elon subsequently turned that feature off. But digital wallets like PayPal now allow you to pay for purchases using using cryptocurrency, and so it is being democratized. It is becoming normal, and this is very much a payment method that the Gen Z is aligned to and interested in using. And then I think one other thing that's really interesting about the Gen Z, cohort is that they really prefer, for many types of products, a subscription model. This concept of unlimited renting over owning, and so we've seen this, play out with Spotify subscriptions, Netflix subscriptions. They're very used to paying a monthly subscription to access products and services, when the reality is that they're never likely to cancel that subscription. Those services are so intertwined in their day-to-day life that it would have to be a very, very severe financial event where they would cancel that subscription. And we're starting to see this, sort of drift into physical goods. And one great example of this I love to talk about is GoPro. Everyone knows GoPro. They've been around for many years, and their business model, though, has suffered in recent years. The idea of going to an electronics department store and buying a GoPro camera, or going to sports or outdoor store and buying a GoPro camera for sort of many hundreds of dollars. That business model has been fairly ineffective. And what's really interesting with GoPro is about a year ago they pivoted their business model to say, let's get into the subscriptions business. And you can see on the right here some of the the stats that they cite are now citing in their most recent earnings calls. But what's really interesting here is that the Gen Z and millennial buyers of a GoPro, they really value that subscription, the access to unlimited cloud storage, the added benefits you get from a subscription around insurance for your camera. They also get significant discounts off of future purchases of accessories, other cameras, etc. And the retention rates for the subscriptions are very, very high, and it's driving significant difference in GoPro's business around margins, operating revenues, etc. And so we're really starting to see, from an e-commerce perspective, these hybrid business models where you're not just buying a perpetual one-time purchase, but you're entering into a subscription or a rental, with the brand, with the retailer. And this is really a business model that Gen Z is very familiar with. So that's a little bit about payments. Let's talk next about Gen Z's almost obsessive focus on the greater good. And if we take a look to Greta Thunberg, I think is sort of a real source of inspiration. They may be kids, but Generation Z is rocking the world with their activism around gun control, immigration reform, and other causes. And 16-year-old Greta Thunberg, or when she was 16, became the youngest individual ever named as Time's Person of the Year in 2019. Really an earth-shaking nod to her sort of worldwide climate change youth movement. And so, one of her mottos is that we can't just continue living as if there was no tomorrow, because there is a tomorrow. And she's inspired hundreds of thousands of young people to participate in her, climate strikes and her cause for environmental issues. And this is really spreading, beyond just, Greta. It's really something that's very instilled in all of Gen Z. And if we look at sort of, I think, three, real sort of critical principles that Gen Z really sort of align around. The first of these is that, when it comes to brands, people must come before profits. In a recent Forrester Research survey, 51% of 18 to 23-year-old Gen Z respondents agreed that they will always research a company to make sure it aligns with their position on corporate social responsibility before making a purchase. Gen Z also believe that brands should not be silent on what's right. If they're being silent, that is wrong. The percentage of Gen Z who believe that their actions can create social change has increased almost 50%. They expect that brands will take a stand along with them, which poses quite the dilemma for risk-averse brands. And then last but not least, performative brands, they must pass or the sniff test. Gen Z puts a premium on brand trustworthiness. So when it comes to brand supports of causes and claims around social issues, sustainability commitments and environmental actions, taking genuine action is key to building that trust. Gen Z won't just take your marketing as truth. They will vet your claims and they will engage with you as a brand only if you're doing an earnest job of leading with their actions versus simply making empty statements to please customers. And we can see this in some of the data. You can see here that, Gen Z believe, more so than their sort of forerunner millennials, that, environmentally or environmental sustainability is a really, really important aspect that they consider when buying from a brand. And likewise, brands must be very, very transparent about their quality and diversity, everything from their employees to their customers to their communities. And I think there's no brand that really has nailed this better than the outdoor brand Patagonia. They have lived and breathed this, and so if we look at some of the things that they've done, everything from a decade ago when they ran this advertising campaign, "Don't buy this jacket," and they basically outlined all of the bad things that happen from an environmental standpoint, impact on resources, etc., that goes into making one of these jackets. Now that campaign actually backfired. Their intent was to do good, and the sales actually rose 30% as a result of the campaign. But you can see, their heart is in the right place. On Black Friday, they close all their stores. They encourage their customers to get out to the outdoors. They have a very robust trade-in and sort of recycle program, a secondhand goods program for the products that they make and sell. And they invest significantly in a whole range of programs, from investing in renewable energy. They have a Drive Less program that gives monetary incentives to employees not to drive to work. They build durable products and try to use raw materials that cause less environmental harm. Their products are built to last not a year but last decades. They donate 1% of all their sales to grassroots environmental groups around the world, and the list goes on and on. The point here is that the Gen Z generation, they really, really not just care about this, but they demand this type of focus on corporate, social, and environmental responsibility from the brands that they do business with. Now, moving forward, it's also important for brands and retailers to get creative with the engagement and marketing tactics that they use with Gen Z. And this is a very, very different world. So we talk a lot about influencer marketing, and I'm going to cover it in a moment, talking about influencers. But there's been a big, big shift in how marketers spend their budget to, attract the attention of Gen Z. And increasingly, a lot of that budget is going to influencer marketing, paying influencers to talk about their brand, to talk about their products. And we can see this, really, really taking off. We can see the size of the influencer marketing, globally has increased dramatically. And influencers are not born influencers. They have to earn followers through creating great content. TikTok and Instagram have given wannabe influencers a platform to be heard and gain followers. And there's no greater example of this than on TikTok. The hashtag Amazon Finds has generated over 6.7 billion views of influencers talking about products that they discovered and bought on Amazon. And another really funny hashtag is TikTok made me buy it. TikTok made me buy it, and it's generated over 1.5 billion views of influencers talking about how other influencers made them buy a product. And so there's this really interesting flywheel effect on influencers. Influencers create more influencers, and it creates this incredibly powerful leverage for brands to use. And if we look a little bit at, again, some stats, so 62% of online retailers and marketers intend to increase their influencer marketing budget. Live streaming commerce, which I'll talk about more in a moment, has more than doubled in China in the last year and has become quite a compelling channel for digital online sales in the Chinese market. 62% of Gen Z millennials have purchased products on smartphones thanks to social media and influencer campaigns. Gen Z really likes, not just an ad, but an ad that's highly personalized to them, that has that sort of authentic message coming from a trusted influencer. And 93% of parents say that their Gen Z children are, have a significant influence on overall household purchases, everything from buying, the next car being an electric vehicle to, making sure that, products that are used or bought in the house are environmentally responsible, et cetera, et cetera. Now, when we think about influencers, there's, not all influencers are made equal. Brands have always historically used celebrities as sort of the backbone of their advertising campaigns. And I think, the car industry is a prime example of this. In the past, car manufacturers would hold, exclusive new vehicle launches for the media. Car magazine editors and TV car show hosts would be invited to those, those events. But today, the car industry is really pivoted, to focus on macro influencers. These are car fanatics with their own YouTube channels and hundreds of thousands of followers. And these macro influencers are the ones that now get the loan of a $200,000 Porsche electric vehicle to test drive. It's a different world. Gone are the glitzy product launches in the south of France. Instead, macro influencers are creating 30-minute reviews filmed in their own backyard that garner millions and millions of views online. And then macro and nano influencers are equally important depending on the product category. Brands can find influencers that are subject matter experts on highly niche product categories. These are evangelists, hobbyists, and geeks that have really found themselves metamorphosized to become influencers. Now, a few examples of this, the cosmetics company e.l.f., they created a really interesting, campaign on TikTok called Eyes, Lips, Famous. And it's really almost a sort of, game show. And what they're doing is they're working with some of TikTok's most notable influencers, Vanny Gregg, Maddie Monroe, and Seth O'Brien. And what they've done is created basically a competition encouraging, TikTok users to upload their videos, showing how the creative ways that they've used e.l.f.'s products, and ultimately the influencers are picking winners, and you can win a $5,000 contract to represent e.l.f. Cosmetics, brand sponsorship, and so forth. And so this has driven a lot of not only brand engagement, but it's driven a lot of online purchases as users of the TikTok platform wanting to participate in this have ultimately purchased e.l.f.'s products. And we see more and more of this, other examples, Walmart recruited Terry Crews and other celebrity influencers to drive a campaign to get TikTok users to upload videos of themselves doing the real drop dance. And so, in under a week, the hashtag trended on TikTok, received over 2 billion hits. And, this campaign content received more than 700 million impressions for Walmart during Black Friday. And it's not just, kind of the videos. When we ask, Gen Zers, what type of content do you want more of from those influencers that you follow? You see here that there's a lot of things that brands have historically invested in themselves or have relied in the past on user-generated content. So there's definitely a landscape shift here where, Gen Zs are becoming more trusting of authentic content from influencers than they are from other sources. Now, last but not least, I think the other thing is that, from an e-commerce landscape perspective, as marketers, as merchants, as brands, as retailers, in the future, it's not good enough just to have a Magento store and to have a digital presence. We need to be where Gen Z are, and we can't expect them to come to us anymore. And so, I think, one great example of this is, what's really a new channel, a new medium is live shopping. And although it's taken off in China, it is rapidly taking off in the US, the UK, and other Western markets. And we can see more and more brands now sort of engaging in this. And this is the shopping channel we had had 20, 30 years ago, but reborn in sort of, with a digital life. And what was really interesting about live shopping is that it's not being given by, a host that's being paid who has no expertise in the product. These live streaming events are being hosted by influencers who already have a huge amount of subject matter domain and are experts in these products. They are evangelists, they love the products, they love the brand, and they are being, in some cases, paid by brands to now promote, products and sell products. And what's different from the shopping channel of old is you can purchase these products instantaneously, one click, Apple Pay, Google Pay, and also it's interactive. And so all of the other, people who are watching this show at the same time, you can interact with them, you can ask questions, and the host can see those questions in real time and respond. So it's a completely different paradigm from the sort of the legacy, home, shopping channels that we had, a few decades ago. And there's lots of examples, again, Walmart, really sort of diving in here, for the holidays back in November. Again, they recruited sort of the who's who of, TikTok influencers, from Michael Lee, Avani, etc. And again, they had those influencers sort of running these live shopping events where, they had, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of shoppers sort of participate, and sort of really a great way to learn about sort of gifts and products that that Walmart was selling during the holidays. And it's not just Walmart, we're seeing this across many different brands. This is Aldo shoes, again, recruiting influential influencers, and I think what's key here is you can see that sort of interactive chat, and it's a very, very different world now where all of the people who are watching the show can interact with one another, they can discuss the products, they can talk about the products. People who maybe already own these products can sort of provide advice and guidance to others who are considering it, and so it's very, very interactive, and super interesting. And then last but not least, we're seeing it's not just about sort of, live shopping, but you've got platforms like Network here that are creating, more sort of like virtual events, a bit like what we're having here today with Meet Magento, where they are, often being used for exclusive drops of new product launches or very sort of limited editions. So again, taking that sort of flash sale model and moving it into social media, moving it into live streaming events. We're seeing sort of virtual festivals where it's not just a focus on sort of e-commerce, but it's an overall event involving artists, creators, etc. And it's more sort of a byproduct that there happens to be sort of an e-commerce store and you can buy products and so forth. And so all of this is new. It's different. And as sort of I wrap up my presentation here, I think if you have teenage children, this presentation may have been a little bit of old news, but for everyone else, hopefully I've been able to provide a bit of an insight into the world of Gen Z. They are here, they are now, and they will be the driving force of online commerce growth over the remainder of this decade. Ignore them at your peril. When you return back to the office, ask yourself, is our online store, is our Magento site, is our current marketing strategy catering for the needs of Gen Z? The answer is probably no. With that, thank you very much. It's been great to be back again, and I hope next year we can all sort of congregate back in person.
I hope so too, Peter. I hope so too. Thank you so much. What a presentation! What a kickoff to Meet Magento UK. I'm definitely going to be watching that again. So I'm thank you, Peter.